Welcome to the war fought without footprints, a war where no pilot ever took off. Yet the skies above Libya trembled with unseen eyes. It was the year 2011. The desert stretched wide and silent beneath a sun that burned white through the haze. From the Mediterranean coast to the sands of Sirte, a storm was gathering, one born not from thunder, but from silence. In the final months of Muammar Gaddafi's rule, Libya became the stage of a hidden war. Officially, it was called Operation Odyssey Dawn, a NATO-led campaign to enforce a no-fly zone and protect civilians. But behind the headlines, beyond the cameras, another battle was unfolding in the thin air above. It was a war waged by watchers, machines with no heartbeat, eyes of steel and light that hovered day and night. The United States, leading from behind, unleashed its silent fleet, the MQ-1 Predator and the MQ-9 Reaper. They were designed not for glory, but for vigilance. No pilot sat inside their frames, only a camera, a signal, and a purpose. Thousands of miles away in Nevada and New Mexico, operators stared at screens glowing in the dark. They guided these drones across continents through clouds and shadows, over cities trembling with unrest. Tripoli, Misrata, Benghazi. Each name carried the weight of history and the hum of distant wings. The drones circled unseen, watching, waiting, marking coordinates whispered into the ether. Targets lit up on thermal maps, convoys, bunkers, armored vehicles, each one outlined in ghostly white. And with a single command, a message left the ground, traveled through satellites, and found its mark in silence. The world saw flashes on grainy news footage, explosions in the desert, smoke curling over ruins. But they never heard the hum before it happened. They never felt the pause, the breath between the decision and the echo. It was a war of precision, they said, a war of technology, not touch. Yet every silence left behind told another story. Some said the drones carried justice. Others whispered they carried shadows. For the men and women who watched through those lenses, the watchers in the sky, the line between safety and sorrow blurred. They saw everything, and yet they felt nothing. Until the silence came. In villages below, people began to tell stories. Stories of the metal birds that glided without sound, of the glowing eyes that followed caravans through the dunes, of the hum that filled the night air just before the earth shook. Some called them angels, others omens. In a land already haunted by war, the sky itself became a spirit watching, remembering, never sleeping. As Gaddafi's forces fell back, the watchers moved closer, their gaze sweeping across strongholds and secret roads. Every movement mapped, every flicker recorded, every silence measured. And as the storm gathered, as uprisings surged through cities, the drones drifted above it all, invisible, patient, waiting for the signal. But what began as protection soon became something else. A conflict seen through screens, decisions made by hands half a world away. For the first time in history, a nation was reshaped, not by armies on the ground, but by eyes in the sky. Eyes that never closed, eyes that never slept. This is their story. The story of a silent war fought from afar, but remembered in whispers. The story of the watcher in the sky, and the silence before the storm. The uprising began quietly, almost like a rumor carried by wind across the desert. In February 2011, the chants rose from Benghazi's crowded streets, young men, students, families calling for change after 4 decades under Gaddafi's rule. The regime's answer came swiftly, with bullets in the alleys and shells pounding city squares. The army moved east, and the air filled with smoke and sirens. Fear spread faster than hope, yet the rebellion hardened. Across Libya's coast, towns erupted one by one. It was no longer protest, it was war. By March, the world could no longer look away. Gaddafi's armored columns closed in on Benghazi, threatening to crush the uprising house by house. Satellite images showed tanks advancing along the coastal highway. Diplomats in New York debated through the night at the Security Council chamber, heavy with urgency. On March 17, Resolution 1973 passed authorizing all necessary measures to protect civilians. The words would unleash a coalition. Within 48 hours, the sky over Libya roared with engines. The sea flashed with missile trails. Operation Odyssey Dawn had begun. The coalition formed quickly: France, Britain, Italy, Canada, and the United States. From the Mediterranean, warships launched tomahawks toward radar stations and air defenses. French Rafales struck armored convoys on the road to Benghazi, halting the advance that could have ended the rebellion. American F-15s and F-16s swept through the skies, clearing threats and enforcing the no-fly zone. Yet beyond the noise of jets, quieter wings joined the fight: Predator and Reaper drones, newly deployed for precision and persistence. They carried no pilots, no insignia, only cameras and silence. From bases in southern Italy, Sigonella and Aviano, the drones climbed into the stratosphere. Guided through satellite links, they crossed Libya's coast unseen. Their lenses scanned every stretch of road, every heat signature, every flash of artillery. They streamed live images back to command centers in Europe and to airmen sitting thousands of miles away in Nevada. In those dim rooms, operators leaned close to screens, watching cities they had never touched. Through fiber and signal, Libya unfolded before them, streets glowing white under infrared plumes rising from hidden batteries. In Misrata, weeks of siege turned neighborhoods into graveyards. Loyalist forces bombarded the port, hoping to starve the rebels inside. Overhead, the drones tracked each mortar position, each movement of supply trucks creeping through shattered suburbs. They relayed coordinates to NATO aircraft circling high above, guiding bombs with pinpoint precision. Civilians sheltering in basements began to speak of a sound in the night, a low hum that came before the explosions, vanishing just as quickly. To commanders, it was technology. To survivors, it felt like judgment whispered from the sky. By April, the pattern settled into rhythm. Drones patrolled around the clock, mapping front lines from Ojdabia to Sirte. Their persistence allowed NATO to strike convoys hidden under camouflage nets, to destroy rocket launchers concealed beside schools. Intelligence officers called them the eyes that never blink. Yet the images were not perfect. Dust storms blurred sensors, decoys misled targeting teams. Reports emerged of strikes that missed, of buildings collapsed with civilians still inside. Each investigation ended in the same phrase: fog of war, yet the silence afterward weighed heavy on those who gave the commands. Inside the Creech Air Force Base in Nevada, crews rotated through 12-hour shifts. They spoke in codes, grids, latitudes, call signs, but beyond procedure lay something harder. Every decision played out in real time, every detonation visible seconds later. Some operators compared the work to surgery. Others said it felt like haunting. Psychologists later documented stress symptoms, the strange dissonance of fighting a war from an office chair. Outside the hangars, desert winds swept across cactus fields, carrying none of the sounds from half a world away. On the ground, rebel militias advanced under NATO's shield. Supply lines opened along the coastal highway, armored pickups replacing tanks. In late May, surveillance feeds showed loyalist forces withdrawing from the east, regrouping toward the capital. The coalition intensified pressure airstrikes, crippled command centers, cut fuel depots, silenced radar arrays. Still, Gaddafi broadcast defiance over state radio, promising victory against foreign crusaders. Each speech was met by another wave of precision strikes. Each night, punctuated by flashes seen from rooftops. Above it all, the drones circled endlessly silent witnesses to a war unfolding beneath them. Summer brought exhaustion and inevitability. In June and July, NATO extended its mandate, confident that time favored the rebellion. Tripoli's defenses crumbled under constant surveillance. No movement escaped detection. Drone feeds revealed dwindling convoys, isolated artillery, dwindling morale. Diplomats urged Gaddafi to flee, but he refused, retreating deeper into fortified compounds. By August, rebels pushed into the suburbs street by street, guided by coordinates relayed from the sky. When the Green Square fell, television cameras captured celebration, but overhead the watchers remained, tracing the next path of escape. The final chapter came in October. Intelligence analysts monitored messages suggesting a convoy leaving Sirte, the last loyalist stronghold. A predator tracked it along a desert road, relaying position to NATO command. Within minutes, French jets struck scattering vehicles into the dunes. Rebels closed in. Chaos erupted. Among the wreckage, Muammar Gaddafi was found alive, dragged from a drainage pipe, beaten and killed by the crowd. The world saw the footage within hours. The mission log recorded completion. For the drones, it was another entry target located, engagement confirmed, then silence. With the dictator gone, NATO declared success. Operation Unified Protector ended on October 31, 2011. More than 26,000 sorties had flown, over 9,600 precision strikes delivered. Drones had logged thousands of flight hours, reshaping the battlefield through constant observation. Western officials hailed a new model of warfare: minimal casualties, no ground occupation victory from the air. Yet analysts warned of fragility: militias, uncoordinated cities, divided weapons scattered. The silence after the storm hid fractures that would soon widen into civil war. For Libyans, the memory of that sky remained. In Tripoli, families recalled the hum that hovered above empty streets. In Misrata, survivors spoke of invisible eyes that saw everything yet could not protect everyone. Folk tales emerged, stories of machines that never landed, of lights gliding over the coast long after the war was declared over. Some said the watchers still circled, remembering every strike, every cry unheard. In markets and mosques, the myth blended with truth, turning technology into legend. Years later, declassified reports confirmed the scale. Predators and Reapers had flown from Sigonella under U.S. Africa Command, supporting NATO missions across the Mediterranean. Their sensors captured terabytes of imagery, feeding real-time analysis. Engineers praised the efficiency. Strategists saw a blueprint for future conflicts. But ethicists questioned distance, the moral gap between trigger and consequence. Could empathy survive 1,000 miles of cable? Could silence replace presence? The debate outlived the war itself. Today, Libya still bears the marks: ruins in Sirte, fractured governance, rival factions vying for power. The skies, though quieter, carry echoes of that first hum. Fishermen on the coast sometimes glance upward at night, claiming to see faint arcs of light fading into the stars. Whether memory or machine, no one knows. The war ended without boots on the ground, but not without ghosts. In the hush between waves, some say the watchers still remember, and the silence listens back. The uprising had already consumed the East when the world began to pay attention. Libya was unraveling, one city at a time. Benghazi aflame with chants of freedom. Misrata trembling under artillery, Tripoli echoing with fear. Gaddafi's voice thundered across state radio, promising to crush the rebellion with fire and iron. His tanks advanced along the coastal highway, engines growling through the dust. Civilians fled east, their eyes fixed on a sky that no longer felt safe. Each day, the front lines shifted. Each night, the horizon glowed red. As the cries grew louder, so did the silence of the world, until the silence broke. When the United Nations voted, it was already too late for many. Resolution 1973, passed on March 17, 2011, authorized all necessary measures. In the Mediterranean, warships readied their launch tubes, pilots strapped into cockpits, screens blinked to life. Operation Odyssey Dawn was born not from conquest, but from urgency. On March 19th, missiles lit the sky above Tripoli, streaking through clouds like falling stars. Radar sights shattered. Anti-aircraft guns fell silent. And in the quiet that followed, new machines took flight, unmanned, unflinching, their wings thin as whispers. They carried no pilots, no faces, only eyes. From the runways of Sigonella and Aviano, the MQ-1 Predator and MQ-9 Reaper climbed into the high air. Their engines purred softly, steady, as breath rising beyond the reach of sound. They crossed the Libyan coast, invisible orbiting cities where the ground burned with chaos. Through lenses of glass and infrared, they mapped every movement, the glare of armored columns, the flicker of rockets, the hidden heat of soldiers huddled behind walls. Thousands of miles away, in darkened trailers in Nevada, operators stared at the glow. They guided the watchers with joysticks and codes, speaking in numbers while the desert outside remained still. War had become a signal, cold, distant, exact. Over Misrata, the watchers hovered for days. Below, the city bled. Streets cracked beneath mortars, hospitals overflowed, and the port became a lifeline. From the sky, the drones traced every shell, fired every convoy, creeping through shattered roads. They marked targets for NATO's strikes. Coordinates whispered through encrypted channels, relayed to jets circling far above. To commanders, it was precision. To those on the ground, it felt like judgment. Families learned to hear the hum before the fire, an invisible presence in the night air that made hearts stop mid-beat. Some said it was protection. Others called it fate. In April, the pattern hardened: watchers by day, fire by night. French Rafales struck convoys near Ajdabiya, guided by drones orbiting unseen. British tornadoes shattered rocket batteries hidden in palm groves. American F-15s roared through the clouds, their paths drawn by satellite eyes. Each mission logged, each strike confirmed. But precision had limits. Dust storms blurred vision. False readings misled decisions. Reports surfaced of errors. Buildings leveled, lives caught in the crossfire. The official phrases were calm collateral damage, misidentification. Yet for those who watched through the screens, the silence after each blast lingered longer than the image itself. Inside Creech Air Force Base, the operators rotated in 12-hour shifts. Coffee gone cold beside keyboards, eyes bloodshot from staring too long. They spoke in clipped tones, grids altitude lock on, but their thoughts drifted beyond the screens. One operator later wrote that distance did not dull the weight. It magnified it. Each time the feed went white, he felt his chest tighten, as if the silence carried back across the cables. They were fighting a war they could see, but never touch, a war of light and absence. Outside, the Nevada sun rose and fell, indifferent to the ghosts flickering across the monitors. By June, the watchers had mapped the entire coast, Tripoli under siege. Sirte fortified, the highway littered with wrecks. Gaddafi's forces thinned under constant pressure, their movements tracked in real time. Every convoy that left a base was traced. Every signal intercepted, every shadow measured. For the first time, the regime fought an enemy without soldiers, an army of eyes and silence. The watchers saw fear settle into the lines of retreat, saw soldiers abandon vehicles and scatter into the dunes. Above them, the hum persisted, steady, watchful, patient. August brought collapse. Tripoli's walls cracked under relentless strikes. Rebels surged forward, guided by coordinates from above. The green square fell beneath a sky alive with invisible wings. Gaddafi fled west, chased not by armies, but by the unblinking gaze of machines. In Sirte, the watchers followed his final convoy's long trails of heat moving across the desert roads. On October 20th, they spotted one leaving the city at dawn. A signal flashed across the network. Minutes later, French jets descended, fire erupting along the highway. The feed flared white. When the dust cleared, the convoy lay shattered. Gaddafi's capture followed his death, chaotic, unseen by the watchers, but recorded in their silence. On October 31st, NATO declared victory. Operation Unified Protector was complete. 26,000 sorties, flown nearly 10,000 ton precision strikes. No NATO soldiers lost. A regime toppled from the air. Officials called it a new chapter, a war of intelligence and precision, proof that technology could deliver justice without boots on the ground. But beneath the triumph lay questions. Could distance cleanse responsibility? Could silence carry compassion? In Libya, the watchers left no monuments, only echoes. Months later, the myths began. Fishermen on the coast swore they still heard the hum at night, low, steady, rolling across the waves. Children pointed at faint lights moving along the horizon, vanishing before dawn. Some believed the watchers had become spirits bound to the sky they once ruled. Others said they were memories looping endlessly above the ruins, retracing every orbit, unable to forget. A scholar from Tripoli disappeared after writing that the drones are not expanding, they are remembering. His apartment was found sealed with sand, his notebook open to a single line. Silence is never empty. Years passed, but the sky never felt the same. The hum returned in dreams, in windless nights, in the pause before storms. And for those who lived beneath it, the watchers were no longer machines. They were reminders of a war fought from afar, of a gaze that saw everything and understood nothing. Libya had been freed, they said, but freedom came with ghosts. The watchers still circle unseen, whispering through the clouds, tracing the outlines of a nation changed forever. The uprising began with a spark that did not belong to Libya alone. In December 2010, a young fruit seller in Tunisia set himself ablaze, and the fire spread across borders like wind over dry grass. The Arab Spring, they called it, a wave of defiance that toppled rulers and shook thrones. In February 2011, Libya joined the storm. In Benghazi, the people marched beneath banners of hope, their chants echoing across streets long silenced by fear. For 42 years, Muammar Gaddafi had ruled with iron hands and golden promises, a revolution turned dynasty. But now the tide was turning. Protest became rebellion, and rebellion became war. The government's response was swift, brutal, unyielding. Tanks rolled into eastern cities, shells tore through neighborhoods, and jets screamed across the sky. Gaddafi called his opponents rats and vowed to cleanse the land house by house. The rebels armed themselves with whatever they could find, rifles, stolen trucks, courage. As the regime's army advanced toward Benghazi, the city braced for slaughter. The world watched in uneasy silence, the question heavy in the air. Would anyone act before it was too late? In New York, inside the marble halls of the United Nations, diplomats argued through sleepless nights. The choice was stark: intervene or watch Benghazi burn. On March 17, 2011, Resolution 1973 passed. Its words were simple yet powerful: all necessary measures to protect civilians. 2 days later, the Mediterranean sky came alive with fire. Missiles roared from warships, jets streaked overhead, and radar stations erupted in flame. Operation Odyssey Dawn had begun a war fought from afar in the name of protection. Amid the roar of engines came something quieter and far more enduring. Rising from bases in Italy, the MQ-1 Predator and MQ-9 Reaper drones took to the skies. They carried no pilots, no voices, only cameras and codes. Their wings shimmered in the sun, then vanished into the clouds. They became the watchers' eyes that never blinked, engines that whispered instead of thundered. From high above, they traced every movement, armored convoys rumbling toward cities, soldiers hidden beneath camouflage flashes of light, betraying gunfire in the dark. In Nevada, thousands of miles away, operators sat in dimly lit trailers, hands steady on joysticks, eyes fixed on glowing screens. Through fiber and satellite, Libya unfolded before them, a world of heat signatures and shadows. They saw everything, but felt nothing. Every strike was a decision measured in seconds. Every silence before impact stretched into eternity. They were warriors of distance fighting a war of sight. When they clicked, lives vanished far away, unseen, unheard. The watchers hovered over Benghazi, Misrata, Sirte. They marked targets, guided fighter jets, delivered precision where chaos reigned. NATO called it surgical, humane, modern. But below, families learned to fear the quiet hum. The sound came before the blast, the stillness before the storm. Children pointed at the sky, whispering to unseen eyes. Some believed they were guardians. Others said they were omens, harbingers of fire. War had found a new language, silence, light, and memory. By summer, the watchers had mapped every corner of the conflict. Gaddafi's forces shrank beneath their gaze. In August, Tripoli fell. The green banners vanished, the crowds cheered, and the dictator fled west into the dunes. Yet the watchers followed. On October 20th, 2011, a convoy was spotted near Sirte. Coordinates flashed across networks, jets descended, fire bloomed across the desert. Hours later, Muammar Gaddafi was captured and killed. NATO declared victory. The mission ended. The watchers returned to their bases, or so the report said. But in Libya, silence has a way of lingering. When the smoke cleared, the hum remained. Fishermen along the coast swore they heard it at dusk, a faint vibration rolling across the sea. In Tripoli, mothers paused at windows, listening for a sound they could not name. Some said it was memory trapped in the air. Others believed the watchers never left. Lights moved across the horizon on windless nights, tracing perfect circles, vanishing before dawn. Not planes, not stars. Something else. Scholars began to write of a new mythology, the ghost sky. They said the drones had imprinted themselves upon Libya's consciousness, turning the heavens into a mirror of war. One physicist wrote that the watchers are not expanding. They are remembering. Months later, he disappeared, his office sealed with sand. On his desk, a single line remained, "Silence is never empty." Years passed, but the sky never forgot. The war had ended yet. Its echoes endured in the hum before storms, in the stillness above ruined cities, in the eyes of children who learned to look upward before they slept. Some said the watchers became spirits bound to the air by the weight of what they saw. Others said they were still there, circling unseen, replaying the past in endless loops. The world moved on new wars, new skies, new watchers. But in Libya, the silence remains. It drifts through the desert, hums across the coast, whispers through the ruins. It asks the same question again and again. When war is fought from above, does peace ever reach the ground? When the guns fell silent in October 2011, Libya stood at a crossroads. NATO declared the mission complete. Operation Unified Protector had ended after more than 26,000 sorties and nearly 10,000 precision strikes. The coalition claimed success. Civilians in Benghazi had been spared. The regime that once vowed to crush them was gone, and foreign troops had never touched Libyan soil. Yet the silence that followed was uneasy. The war was over, but stability did not come. In Tripoli, celebrations filled the streets, gunfire in the air, flags waving beneath a sky once filled with aircraft. The National Transitional Council took power, promising unity and elections. But beneath the surface, divisions were already forming. Former rebel groups refused to disarm. Militias claimed neighborhoods, ports, and oil fields. Cities like Misrata, Zintan, and Benghazi each held their own command. The central government had authority in name, but power on the ground belonged to those with guns. For NATO, the campaign was seen as a model, a new kind of intervention built on air power and intelligence. Drones had played a critical role. From bases in Italy, Predators and MQ-9 Reapers provided continuous surveillance, guided strikes, and supported missions across the country. U.S. Africa Command and allied forces used real-time imagery to track movements and identify threats. It was the first time unmanned aircraft were integrated so deeply into a multinational military operation. Officials praised the technology for precision and reduced risk. But others questioned what came after a war that ended from the air, leaving the ground fragmented. By 2012, Libya faced growing challenges. Weapons from Gaddafi's arsenals spread across borders. Rival militias clashed for control of cities and oil terminals. Without a unified army, the state struggled to enforce law. In Benghazi, violence returned, attacks on consulates, assassinations of officials. The promise of democracy gave way to fear and uncertainty. NATO had withdrawn, foreign aircraft were gone, yet the sense of conflict remained. International observers began to debate the lessons of Libya. Supporters argued the intervention had prevented a massacre in Benghazi and upheld humanitarian principles. Critics warned that removing the regime without a plan for reconstruction left a vacuum. The drones and bombers could end a battle, but they could not build a nation. Reports from humanitarian organizations described displaced families, damaged infrastructure, and lingering trauma among civilians caught in the crossfire. Former drone operators later spoke about their missions. Some described the intensity of watching live feeds for hours, tracking convoys, verifying targets, and waiting for authorization. The strikes they guided were accurate, but the distance made the experience surreal. They fought a war through screens thousands of miles away with consequences they could only imagine. Their accounts revealed the emotional weight of remote warfare, precise in execution, but detached from the lives affected below. By 2014, Libya descended once more into conflict. Competing governments emerged, one in Tripoli, one in Tobruk. Foreign powers backed different sides. Militias became armies. The country fractured into zones of influence. The intervention that had promised liberation now stood as a warning that toppling a dictator from the sky did not guarantee peace on the ground. Today, historians see the 2011 intervention as both a success and a lesson. It showed the power of coordinated air campaigns and intelligence systems, the reach of modern drones, and the limits of force without follow-through. The watchers, those silent eyes in the sky, changed the battlefield forever. But what remained after they left was a nation still searching for stability, its skies quiet yet heavy with memory. The war had ended in sound and fury, but its echo lived on not in myth, but in the fragile reality left behind. The war had ended, yet its echoes lingered across Libya's broken cities. NATO announced victory, the skies cleared, and the world moved on. But within Tripoli and Benghazi, the signs of division were everywhere. Rival militias burned convoys, flags of new factions rising where old ones had fallen. The intervention had saved thousands in Benghazi from a brutal assault, yet left behind a nation without a center. People returned to their homes only to find their streets patrolled by different armed groups. The sky was quiet now, but on the ground, power had shattered into fragments. International observers praised the mission, a swift, precise campaign with minimal Allied casualties. No foreign boots on Libyan soil, no drawn-out occupation, a model, they said, for humanitarian intervention. The United Nations cited Resolution 1973 as a triumph of global conscience, all necessary measures taken to protect civilians. Yet behind those headlines, questions grew. Could an air campaign alone deliver peace? Could precision bombs replace diplomacy? Could nations be rebuilt from above even in success? Doubt began to whisper. Drone warfare had proved its value. MQ-1 Predators and MQ-9 Reapers, circling from bases in Italy, providing live intelligence guiding strikes with near-surgical accuracy. For NATO, it was a glimpse into the future, remote eyes, remote hands, remote wars. But technology's precision came with distance. Operators sitting thousands of miles away, guiding missiles through pixels, never walking the streets where those missiles fell. They won battles through screens, but saw only fragments of the lives behind the targets. War had become data-detached, efficient, and strangely silent. For civilians, that silence carried weight. Survivors spoke of the seconds before each strike, the world holding its breath, the sudden pause in wind, the absence of birds. Then the blast. In interviews years later, many described the air as haunted by memory. The machines had left, but the feeling remained, a deep mistrust of quiet skies. Psychologists called it anticipatory trauma, the fear born not of explosions, but of stillness. War's sound had faded, but its silence endured. By 2012, the fragile unity began to unravel. Militias refused to disarm rival leaders, claimed legitimacy, and weapons from Gaddafi's arsenals flowed across borders. Without a strong central government, Libya became a patchwork of cities ruled by local power. NATO had achieved its goal, the protection of civilians, but not the promise of stability. In 2014, a second civil war erupted, dividing the nation once more. The intervention was complete, but the peace never arrived. Historians looked back and saw a lesson in contrast. Libya proved that modern air power could stop atrocities, but not shape societies. The precision of drones, the speed of strikes, none could replace the slow work of rebuilding trust, law, and institutions. Some scholars called it the paradox of protection, to save a people without staying to guide them. The skies could end a regime, but could not teach a nation how to stand again. In Europe and the United States, policymakers debated the meaning of success. Was Libya a humanitarian victory, or a warning? Supporters argued that inaction would have led to mass killings in Benghazi. Critics replied that intervention without a post-war plan created chaos. The truth lay somewhere between. The operation had fulfilled its mandate, but failed to imagine the morning after. Air power had bought time, yet time without vision became another battlefield. Former drone pilots began speaking publicly about their experiences. They described long hours watching live feeds, identifying convoys waiting for clearance to strike. They remembered the moment the missile left the wing, the flash on screen, the silence after. They said it was both powerful and distant, a war felt through sight, not sound, not touch. One operator said, "You don't hear the screams, but you see the fire, and it stays with you." Technology had changed the battlefield, but not the burden of conscience. For Libyans, the legacy was more complex. Many were grateful for the end of Gaddafi's rule, yet disillusioned by what followed. Cities bore scars not only from bombs, but from broken promises. Elections came and went. Governments rose and fell. The oil wealth that once bound the country now fueled rivalries. What began as a mission to protect became a symbol of unfinished justice. The watchers in the sky had gone, and the people below were left to build what remained. Years later, analysts still revisit Libya when speaking of intervention. Its skies marked the dawn of remote war, precise, unmanned global. But its ground told another story, that freedom cannot be delivered by altitude alone. Nations need more than protection. They need presence, patience, and purpose. The war of 2011 ended swiftly, yet its questions endure. Can machines fight for humanity? Can silence ever mean peace? Libya stands as both lesson and warning, a country saved from one fate yet left to navigate another, beneath a sky that once watched without sleeping. The war's reflection lingers, not in sound, but in memory. In the quiet years that followed, Libya became a mirror for the world, reflecting the promise and the price of intervention from the sky. The skies that once roared with engines now hung heavy with questions. NATO's aircraft had departed, yet the nation below remained fractured. The campaign had saved lives, but the silence that replaced the strikes was not peace, it was uncertainty, waiting, unresolved. Across diplomatic halls, debates echoed. Was it victory or warning? The mission had fulfilled its mandate. Civilians protected, atrocities prevented, but it left behind a nation searching for direction. The eyes that once watched from the clouds could not rebuild what lay below. Policy analysts wrote reports, commissions issued findings, but the truth was simple, and heavy wars fought from above could end battles, not beginnings. Technology had outpaced strategy. Precision had outpaced purpose. For those who guided the drones, the war never truly ended. Many spoke years later of the dissonance, the silence in the command room, the detachment of screens, the flash that meant finality. They carried images, not sounds. They had struck from afar, yet felt the closeness of consequence. Some found pride in precision, others burdened by distance. The mission had asked them to see everything but not to feel. In Libya, the people carried their own memories. Children born under the roar of aircraft grew up in cities divided by flags. Markets reopened, but suspicion lingered. Each lull in the wind recalled the moments before impact. The watchers were gone, but the gaze remained an invisible presence above every quiet night. The war had become a part of the air itself, unseen but never forgotten. Scholars called it the dawn of the remote age, a world where soldiers could fight without stepping on foreign soil, where wars could be waged without footprints. Yet Libya stood as reminder that footprints matter. Without presence, protection was fragile. Without dialogue, peace was fleeting. Nations could intervene but could not inhabit the struggles they left behind. The lesson was written in the dust of Sirte and the silence of Benghazi. Elsewhere, the model repeated: new conflicts, new skies, new watchers. Each time the question returned, could intervention be both distant and humane? Could technology carry empathy? Could precision create stability? The Libyan sky answered in silence. It had seen victory declared, yet witnessed division endure. It had felt the weight of good intentions and the gravity of absence. Years passed and Libya remained in flux, governments rising and falling, foreign powers competing, civilians caught between promises. The intervention was history, yet its consequences lived on. The hum of engines was gone, but the memory of eyes above the clouds lingered. For many, the sky became a symbol of salvation, of abandonment, of a war fought without touch. In museums and archives, footage played drone feeds, mission logs, satellite images. Historians analyzed every frame, searching for clarity. But the story was not in the data, it was in the spaces between. In the lives interrupted, the hopes deferred, the silence that followed. The watchers had recorded everything, yet the meaning remained elusive. As the world looked back, Libya became a lesson etched in both triumph and regret. Air power had proven its strength, but not its sufficiency. Protection had been real, but incomplete. The sky had saved but could not stay. The war's legacy was not only in what was done, but in what was left undone. And so the question endures when wars are fought from the sky. Who bears the weight of what follows? The silence after the blast is not an ending. It is a reminder. The watchers may leave, but the sky remembers.